Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Law Academy. This lesson is coming at you from the beginning of 2025, unless you're a members only a level 2 member on the channel, in which case you would have seen this a few months earlier. Now, let me explain to you what this is going to be. So, fundamentally, the end of 2023 and the entirety of 2024 has been devoted on the Law Academy to teaching the core modules, to teaching crime, to teaching contract law, to teaching trusts, land, torts, etc., etc., etc. And now that we have done that, the beginning of 2025, the year of 2025, and going forward into the future, we are going to be doing lots of what would be considered more optional side modules for law in England and Wales. We're going to begin by teaching 3 subjects a week in 2025. We're going to be teaching company law, we're going to be teaching family law, and we're going to be teaching criminal evidence law. There are another number of others that are in the sort of pipeline to also come out towards the end of 2025 and then going into 2026, including employment law, including human rights, including all kinds of things, restitution, history of English law, etc., etc., etc. So that's fundamentally what is happening. Now, we've made a number of changes to the structure of these lessons and to the way these lessons essentially are taught. The first thing that we have done is that if you see down here, there is a little date mark. This is the date at which I am recording this lesson, and this is the date at which essentially the lesson is up to date for, okay? So obviously, one of the things that is important to remember about law is that it is consistently changing, and it is always changing. There are always new judgments, new ways in which the law has essentially happened. Things have been overturned, things have been upheld, etc., etc. Now, if I was to teach all of the core modules and then a bunch of other additional modules, and in 5 years' time I've taught maybe 30 to 40 different topics in law, it would be basically impossible for me to keep up with and to update everybody with every single case that comes out that upholds or strikes down a particular thing in all of these different areas. So what I'm going to do is essentially every 5 or so years on this channel remake the lessons with major updates to specifically the core modules as well. And so for those of you who are watching these lessons in the future, maybe it's 2026, 2027, the little number there, the little date there, gives you an indication as to when this video was made and the kind of legal updates that you should bear in mind that may have taken place after this video has come out. For the most part, people tend to, in my opinion, in my expert opinion, overestimate the extent to which the law changes in one area or another. If you take a textbook on, let's say, the criminal law from 5 years apart, okay, there will be changes, obviously. There's always changes and developments. But for the most part, the lessons will stay basically the same. We'll be covering some of the most basic fundamental cases that are unlikely to be updated or reformed. So for the most part, these lessons are going to have value going 5, 10, maybe even 15 years into the future. But just bear that in mind with that little number at the side as to when this lesson was made. A second thing that we're going to do is have the bibliography and further reading to each of these lessons on a slide at the end of the lessons, where I will then discuss certain chapters of certain books or certain resources, online resources, which will have value to everybody who is looking to follow along and maybe get into a bit more detail, into the weeds, into these topics. And then finally, along that line, I'm also set up a specific Substack page for this channel, for the Law Academy, where I'll be releasing a very detailed list of further reading, additional cases, additional tidbits of information here and there, so that you can have a much fuller picture of the course structure. So it actually is akin to the kind of courses that you would find at university, where you have like a reading list, where you have have a further reading, where you have additional materials and you have additional things like a little handout sheet. That's basically what that Substack is going to be, and I'll link that into in the description below, and I will be updating that as time goes on with additional bits, maybe some legal news, maybe even if there is a case that has come out that upholds or strikes down a particular principle that is discussed in a lesson, instead of redoing the whole lesson, I might just put a Substack post up that makes a clear indication as to the updates in that case. So I'm sort of basically doing a bit of cross-platform promotion and a bit of cross-platform integration, such that we can actually have some written material alongside these videos. Okay, so with all that being said, I would like to introduce everybody to company law. We did an introduction to company law very, very early on in 2024 or 2023, and now we're going to start going into company law every single week from now on. Beginning first with this, business structures. We're going to spend a few lessons talking about some of the most basic introductory foundational elements of the company, before getting into some of the key areas when it comes to creation of a company, the idea of corporate personality, the idea of the corporate veil, and the justifications in the common law and in statute for when the corporate veil is pierced. All of that in future lessons' time. For now, we're going to take a look at some of the introductory elements of the business. Okay, we're going to talk about a conversation relating to the different kinds of business structures which may exist, as well as the distinctions and the reasons for there to be distinctions and delineations between these business structures. So, when we look at business law, or when we look at company law, what we tend to do is delineate between three different types of business structure. We will begin by thinking about the sole trader or the sole proprietorship. We will then move on to looking at the partnership, and then we will finish by examining the nature of the company. Now, given that this is a series of lessons on company law, of course, the main focus of this series of lessons will be on the company. But it's important that you just have a general understanding of other business structures which exist, which people can rely on when they are operating and creating businesses and doing business. It also is useful to highlight these different types of business structures for the purposes of essentially being able to delineate those kind of business structures from that of a company. Why is a company different to a partnership or a sole trader, for example? So beginning first then, the sole trader is simply a single individual who carries out a business. Simple as that, really. They are the business, okay? There is no separate entity between the sole trader and the business itself. They are both the same, one and the same person, okay? Now, this isn't to say that people who have companies cannot be single individuals, or that people who are sole traders could only operate as a single individual, just that the business is not separate to the sole trader. It is not separate to the person who is carrying out said business. The sole trader is generally reserved for those operations which are very, very small, very micro-entity business operations. Things like electricians and plumbers, they will tend to operate as sole traders since they are the only people as part of that business operation. Now, there is the ability and the capability for a sole trader to own property, for a sole trader to own intellectual property, for a sole trader to take on employees, and to do all kinds of things in this regard. But for them, and so you can have business structures which are considerably bigger than just a single individual that are still sole traders. This is something that is able to take place and to carry out in an ordinary business environment. The next major business structure is this idea of the partnership. Now, the partnership is slightly more complex, owing to the fact that it is situations where there are two or more persons who wish to go into business with each other and together, but will not want to do so under the auspices of the sole trader, obviously, nor would they want to do so under the auspices of a company. That's why we have this idea of a partnership. Generally, the partnership structure can exist in a number of sub-forms. You can have the simple partnership structure. You could also have a limited liability partnership, which sort of takes the idea of the company and the idea of the partnership and merge them together in some ways. We will be focusing mainly on the first of these two types of partnerships. The regulation of the partnership business structure can be seen when we look at the Partnership Act from 1890, and specifically Section 1, Subsection 1 of the Partnership Act, which gives us a definition of a partnership in this regard. They say that a partnership can be defined as, quote, the relation which subsists between persons carrying on a business with in common with a view to profit. All of which, of course, makes sense. It is two or more people carrying on together in a business with a view to make some money, to actually profit from them. Finally, then, we have this idea of the company. And this is, of course, the subject of this series of lessons, the idea of the company and company law. Why is the company any different to a sole trader or any different to an ordinary partnership? What is the difference between these things? Well, of course, like I said, is the study of this series of lessons. The most important part of the company and the key distinguishing feature between the company and the idea of the sole trader or the sole proprietor or even the partnership is the process which is known as incorporation. Incorporation is a process which involves the creation of an entity in law which has specific legal personhood. It has specific legal personality. This is what distinguishes the company from other forms of business structure. The company will operate as a separate entity to that of the people who run it. So when I was talking about the sole trader, I made a point that the sole trader is the same as the person who is doing the sole trading. If we have a plumber, for example, who has a sole trader, they are the business. When they die or retire, the business dies or dissolves, okay? If we had a company, okay, if a person was to leave or to retire, the person who created the company, that does not mean that the company ceases to exist. The company carries on. The company is its own separate thing in law. And the reason why you might have a company is quite vast and quite determinative, because for many reasons it is beneficial to have a company. It is beneficial in the sense that a company, when it comes to limited liability, a company can take hold of and take on a lot of the financial liabilities of the business and incur quite a lot of the debts of the business, that if things go awry and we enter into a situation of liquidation or insolvency, the people who are running the business are protected. Their assets are protected from potential creditors. Whereas if you had a single business, a sole trader business, or you had a not so limited liability, an unlimited liability company, which very few people have, you could have the situation where insolvency and liquidation could mean that some of your own personal assets are on the line when it comes to the repatriation to creditors, which is of course not good. A company also is able to represent itself in law rather than a single individual. A company is able to take on and hold property in law rather than just a single individual. It is a business entity and a business structure that is able to have quite a lot of flexibility, especially when it comes to people coming and going within the company as well, within that corporate structure. So with all this being said, this is the bibliography, citations, and further reading. Okay, there are a number of different parts of this that we can look at here. Okay, so of course the citations come from Hannigan's company law. They come from Dignam and Roach and Lowry's company law, the core text series. Notice here that these are all from 2021, 2022, and even the revision guide by Roach is from 2023. In terms of the revision guide, the company law concentrate is a very good, useful illustration of basically giving you an overview of each of these different business structures. In addition to that, I'm pretty sure reading Concentrate, you can actually get a bit more of an insight into the nature of the limited liability partnership. So if you feel like that we haven't gone into that in enough detail in this lesson, then go over and have a look at the Roach Concentrate and to see some more details on that. But for that and given all of these different further readings, of course, some of the most important and arguably the sort of Bible of modern company law is, of course, Gower's Principles of Modern Company Law by Sweet and Maxwell.